Good afternoon, everyone. Suppose I better turn this thing on here. I forgot about it. Give you more gadgets to play with here. Driving down here, a lot of smoke in here. You come to some of those valleys and it's pretty smoky. So I can tell my allergies are kind of picking up on that. You know, when you have allergies, how that happens. But, you know, we live in a world, brethren. Excuse me, allergies here. We live in a world that is falling apart at the seams, doesn't it? You know, you turn the TV on and you see buildings burning, cars burning, you know, people doing all sorts of bad things. You know, it's amazing how this world has transformed in the last few years, isn't it? You know, it used to be you'd see these things in Israel or in Europe someplace, you know, Middle East. Now it's come to the United States, hasn't it? Things have changed. You know, my son lived in Minneapolis. Well, actually, he was in Bloomington. During those riots, they went, well, actually after the riots a little bit, they went out to a restaurant. This black guy walks in, big, burly guy. Okay, guys, we need money for the cause. He was demanding money. And the really funny part about what this little lady gets up, chews him out, grabs him by the ear, and sends him outside, and he goes all the way like this. You know, so talk about courage. I'd say probably God protection even because, you know, you see a lot of pictures of people being taken apart, you know, hurt and killed. But she stepped in and she changed the whole situation. But we live in a world that, you know, you don't feel safe like you used to do. I remember when I was growing up, you know, my parents never locked the doors. You know, you could go downtown in Brookings where I grew up, cars be running at night, you know, be cold outside, everything, you know, no problem. But you wouldn't dare do that anymore, would we? It's just the way it is in this world today. Things are different. You know, why is this happening? Have you ever asked yourself that? You know, terrorism is something that's really becoming a part of the world more and more all the time. You know, where does that attitude come from? Things changed in our country in 9/11, and before that we were pretty much protected, but we're not that way anymore. You know, let's make no fact, terrorism is warfare. We're under siege. This world is under siege. But where does that come from? Who's behind all that? You know, we blame different people for funding this and funding that. But who is actually to blame for that things that are going on? We're about to enter into a time in the church cycle to understand more what's going on with our world today. You know, who's the head of it? Satan is the number one terrorist. That's where it all comes from. You ever think of that when you watch these terrible things going on? I was watching a newscast a few weeks back, and this newscast said, "Look at those people. They're demon-possessed." And I think, oh, whoops. I wonder how long he kept his job, you know, saying something like that over the air. But he's right. You know, you could look at their attitude, their eyes, and the things that they're doing. You know, they were following their leader. But that's how this world is acting right now. I'm just going to go through today and show us God's plan a little more of why things are happening like they are right now, of why people are being led astray, that Satan is actually involved, but also to go into God's plan to solve that problem. The problem of just, you know, being out of touch with God. You know, people in general do not understand God, do they? You know, there's people who say they love God, and I'm sure that they do. They think they do. But just the same, where's all this coming from? You know, there's a plan being worked out here, brethren. And we're in a plan that's going to get rid of Satan. That's what we're dealing with this period of time in church holy days, a time to get rid of Satan, the number one terrorist, the one that's bringing all these things upon this earth that we are dealing with today. There's terrorist cells all over the place. And even in Brookings, we have temples and things that I'm sure that some things are being plotted right now. A little town. But we're not safe. Nobody's really safe unless God protects us anymore. We need God's protection more and more all the time, because without God's protection, we're just totally destroyed, because there's so much influence in the air around us. That influence is leading people in a different direction that we want to go. Very much so. That's the world we live in. There's been a breach of security, hasn't there, in this world? The leadership of this world is not God, is it, anymore? Well, it hasn't been. But it's more evident all the time where the leadership is coming from. You can see so many things. It's amazing how our enemy has deceived this whole world. The whole world is deceived. We call days like Monday, Moon Day, and so on. The whole world's that way. All the holy days and things that the world keeps are not what God proclaimed. Even I'm interested in space. I've always liked to watch these rockets and things, but they're even named after false gods. Apollo and different things like that. So it's amazing how much we have, how much influence that this world is under right now, and has been. But it's coming to a crescendo right more all the time, isn't it? Of how things are just, beyond control. I'd like to turn to Ephesians 6:12. Ephesians 6:12. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. That's what we're dealing with. We look at these leaders that are bringing all these things upon us. They're just following their leader. They're doing what he would do. He rebelled against God. He just tried to destroy God way back in the Garden of Eden, destroy that plan that God has. And he's been at it ever since. But we stand out here, our enemy is not other men. It's Satan behind them. They don't know it, but that's how it is. He's on scene. But the influence is unreal, how much influence he really has. We're just human beings, but we're fighting against spiritual powers. And I think we need to understand that more all the time, because, we're not just fighting these individuals. We have people in politics that are fighting against other people in politics. But in reality, we're fighting against the top dog, Satan himself. He wants to bring chaos and destroy this world. He's doing a pretty good job, isn't he? The only thing is, we don't see the use of a lot of these weapons yet, but down the line that'll come. I was listening to the president the other day. He says we've got weapons now that are unbelievable. I'm sure we don't know anything about a lot of them they have. But think if these things were unleashed with no restraint, this world would change in an instant. Look how fast it changed this last year. I went to work and came home, and going to be a 2-week vacation or whatever they have. Never went back to work until this fall. That's how fast things changed. We had no inkling, no understanding what was going on. And all of a sudden it changed. And that's just a small thing when you read the Bible, the things that can happen. But our enemy, Satan, is the architect of all these things that are going on right now. And we need to understand that and know, and don't blame any place else. He's the one that is accomplishing his job. Isn't it amazing how he could convince mankind to follow him? Here's God with all these promises, all the many blessings God gives, and we as men turned our back. I don't want them. I want that tree of good knowledge. That's what, to me, and to, when we think about it, that's really not very smart, is it? When we think we're smarter. But, you and I wouldn't have done any different if we were back then, because, they didn't know what was going on. They didn't know about this battle that was going on behind the scenes, just like you and I. They lived their lives, they made mistakes. And we do the same. We live our lives, we make mistakes. We do dumb things at times, don't we? But he's very clever, Satan is. Very, very clever. He gets us to do things that seem so good to us, doesn't he? Seems so good. And yet, the end of it is away from God, a way of being destroyed. We have religion, but a lot of that religion is led astray by Satan. He makes mankind think, oh, you're doing okay. And yet we're going the opposite direction. Look at the United States the last few years. If my mother would have listened to some of the things going on now, she'd be flabbergasted, like she'd say. Imagine having an abortion a few days before you're going to be born. She wouldn't have understood that at all. And yet, we don't really hear an outcry like we really should, do we? You don't hear that outcry. Sure, there's some people trying to say something, but it's all covered up. It's all being held back. And that's what Satan's so good at doing. He's influenced every organization that we have. You look at the government, you look at education. People, just the other day, were arrested and put in jail for singing hymns in a parking lot. Arrested, taken away in handcuffs. You wouldn't have thought that would have been possible even 6 months ago or a year for sure. But can you imagine be singing a hymn and the police come along and throw you in jail? Look at the influence that's being peddled out there right now. It's just, you look at it, you shake your head and say, what in the world is going on? What happened to the liberty that God gave us in this country? People don't realize the blessing it is to live here. We really don't. I know I had a cousin, he's passed on now, but he flew for Saudi Air. He found out that it's not always like it is in the United States around the world. They were in their house or home or whatever, apartment. The police came and grabbed them and took them down and just scared the daylights out of them. Those things happen. And that's the world that we live in outside of this country. But most people aren't aware of what's really going on, are they? We're just not. We look at what around us here, everything looks pretty good most of the time. You look in Sioux Falls, there's, pretty peaceful most generally. You hear more things happen in Sioux Falls than there used to be. I know when I was a young man who used to come down to Sioux Falls, you could go any place you wanted to go at night. There's places I wouldn't want to go at night anymore, probably even in the daytime, But that's just how it is. Things have changed. That influence is down into our little state, And we don't have that many people here. We're a small state comparably with people. God is slowly showing us that, hey, you better wake up. You better wake up because things are changing. This all started with two beings, didn't it, brethren? God the Father and Jesus Christ. They decided we don't want to be alone. So they made angels. They created angels, and all went fine for a long time. Well, we don't know how long, the Bible doesn't tell it, but it kind of appears that way. That went on for some time. And things changed. All of a sudden, one of the beings, and probably several of the beings, the way it sounds, began to question and to think that they were better than they were. No, I'm just as good as God. In fact, I think I'm a little better. Things changed. Attitudes changed. That's where it all started. And we're involved in that warfare. God made mankind and set us on this earth. He set us here to understand, or to learn, actually, to become God, to become like Him, to change. That's what we're here. That's what God's involved in. Most of the people don't understand that, but that's what's going on right now. So God said, well, this didn't work out. We had all good angels, now we got good and bad. So He made mankind so they could, work out things, make things work better. If these people went the wrong direction, they could be taken care of. They wouldn't be tormented forever like some of the angels are going to be tormented forever. But that's what God's life or way is a way of love. We don't see too much love in this world today, do we? We really don't. This world is being torn apart at the seams by hate. And I'm not saying everybody hates. I'm just saying the world in general is torn apart by hate. All through, we hear peace, peace, peace in the Middle East right now. The way it sounds like they signed a bunch of things. How long will that last? Probably not too long. Because that place is so volatile, so much hate over there, that I can't foresee it lasting for a long, long time. But God put mankind in a garden with 2 trees to make a decision. I remember Mr. Armstrong talking about those 2 trees so many times. 2 trees, one, that God wanted to choose, and the other one, no. Mankind chose the wrong tree, and we paid for it ever since. And we can't just blame Adam, like I said before, and Eve, because they didn't know. They were deceived just like we've been deceived. We've been deceived. I know I have been. You have been too. We've been told things that aren't true. We've been taught things that aren't true. But that's the way of Satan, to give you something and make you think it's true, and some of it is, but some of it isn't. That's just the way things are. Everything looks so good. Yet behind the scenes, you're going to fall into a trap. And I'm sure a lot of these people that are doing the things that they're doing will understand that someday. Hey, that wasn't the smartest thing I ever did. That's just how we have to look at things. But those 2 trees, like Mr. Armstrong said, symbolize 2 ways of life. 2 ways. God's way and the enemy's way. And that's what we're fighting today. God wants us to live His way. He wants mankind to live His way. But all this influence in high places has changed that. It's hard to live God's way, isn't it? Just like the man was talking about, there's always something coming up that I spoke this morning. Always something coming up around peacetime. All the time. I remember around Atonement, I used to really get into a lot of different situations when I was in situations I was living with. I mean, everything would literally just blow up around trumpets and around Atonement. Too many bad things happen around that time because Satan just hates that time. So that's what God is we want us to understand, that this plan, this day that we're about to keep, atonement, that's a part of His plan, to bring us back to Him, back to God's way, back to the love that God has for you and I. We're living in a world that doesn't understand that. We're living in a world that goes the opposite direction and thinks everything's good. Step on the other person. That's the world we're living in right now. In Isaiah 59:2, this is what's going on. But your iniquities have separated between you and your God, and your sins have hid His face from you, that He will not hear. And that's what's going on. We've all sinned in this world, and God isn't going to hear us. If we fall into the trap that this world has fallen into. Iniquity has separated us from God. God can't stand iniquity. So, we need something to pay for that sins that have been between us, so that barrier between God and mankind. We need to be able to do something to take care of that bridge or that gap that we have. We have, in this world, we have made mistakes. And atonement is going to help us to come closer to God. We keep atonement. We come together to celebrate the soon coming government of God, the soon coming, peace that this earth is going to have. We can't imagine being at one with God, can we? You really can't. I mean, we think you can, but when it comes right down to it, we have so much influence in this world that we just truly can't understand to really be close and true to God. We think we can, but our minds can't wrap around being a God, can we? We just can't wrap around it with no sin. No sin. No evil thoughts. That's something that we, hard to imagine it. Hard to imagine that this is what mankind is heading for. Because we're used to being terrorized by the enemy. Let's see. I was going to something here. Let's look at some of the things that this world and what the attributes that Satan has. There's a bunch of verbs that can describe him. First of all, he tempts, doesn't he? He tempts. He puts something out there that we can want, and that we think we can achieve. He possesses. He deceives. He takes away. He binds and wounds people. Things happen to people. He lies. He takes advantage of. Scheming. Just so many things. He torments. He hinders. He destroys. I was reading Mr. Kubik's story about his family. Showed some soldiers who were going through the ruins that towns have been destroyed. That's what happens. We're led to that thing. He blasphemes. He slanders. Look at the news today, how much slander there is out there. Accuses. Look. Leads astray. Lustful. No truth in him. Maligns, afflicts, sins, devours, and murders. Lies again. Lives in darkness. He does lying wonders. You hear miracles and things. He counterfeits. Look at all the counterfeit things that have been counterfeited in this world. They're counterfeits of something God says is good. But it's a counterfeit. It's not quite like it should be. He's proud. He weakens, tears things down, exalts self. That's so much a part of human beings, isn't it? Exalt yourself. Filled with violence, corrupted. And there's many, many more things that you could say about him. But that's a few of the attributes that this world has through Satan. And we have to blame it on him, because he's the one that makes it sound good. The works of the flesh that we all have to work with. Galatians 5:20. Idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, variance, wrath, strife, sedition, and heresy, envies, murders, drunkenness, reveling, and such are which I tell you before, that I have also told you in time past, that they are them which do things that should not inherit the kingdom of God. Now that's what this world is about. That's why we need to change. This whole world needs to change. But it can't with all the things that are going on. Turn to 1 John 2:15. 1 John 2:15. Love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. For if any man loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. No, we can't do that. Verse 16, for all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of the life is not of the Father, but is of the world. That's how this world operates, isn't it, what we're talking about here? You know, society is based upon lust, pride, and greed. You got to have more, and you're great. You know, you got to do this exercise, and you're going to be great. You're going to be better than anybody else. You know, you see these ads. You know, to build yourself up, and there's nothing wrong with it in the right way. You know, we need to continue to grow and to change, but not to, you know, to use that pride and the greed that goes with that. You know, this is what actually led Lucifer astray, wasn't it? I wanted God. I want to be God. I want His power. You know, I'm beautiful. I'm smart. I'm do all these things. I should be there. And how many people have you dealt with that feel that way? I should be the head boss. You know, not for the right reasons. He wanted what he saw, and that's how this world operates. We see something we wanted, and we go after it. And there's nothing wrong with going after things in the right direction, but in the wrong way, it's all wrong. We have to make decisions, don't we? And he was not satisfied with what he had. You know, he was in charge of all these angels. Looks like he's in charge of this earth. He's in charge of a lot of things. He had a lot of power, one of the archangels. A lot of power, and yet it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. He wanted more. And that's what our human nature tells us to go out and I want more. I'm greater than I am. You know. In Jude it says, it talks about the angels, you know, leaving what they had. You know, they thought they needed more. God assigned them a place to be, and they left it. Went after things they shouldn't go after. Did things they shouldn't have done. But that's what happened. Notice in James 4:4, James 4:4. Ye adulterous and adulteresses, know not that the friendship of the world is enmity with God, and whosoever therefore will be a friend of the world is an enemy of God. You know, that's something we have to deal with. You know, we can't be a friend of the world. We have to live in the world. We have to accomplish things that we need to accomplish, but we can't be friends of the world. You know, you look at people. God lays down certain laws, just simple things like eating. You know, how many people would just look at you crazy? Well, I don't eat certain seafoods and pork and things. They think you're crazy. I know I've been called crazy when I first started attending. You know, you mean you can't eat pork? What's wrong with you? You know, or seafood. You know, shrimp. Well, that shrimp is good. Why don't you have some? You know, we've all gone through that. You know, but the world doesn't understand that God puts those laws there for a reason. You know, you can do all those things that you want to, and down the line you probably pay a price. But that's how the world operates. That's how the world. I'm going to do my thing when I want to do it and how I want to do it. Just get out of the way, God. Get out of the way. You know, I'll call you on you when I really need you. You know, like they say, there's really no atheist in a foxhole in the war. You know, a lot of people have said that. Well, you look at what goes on around us. You watch TV or movies or things. You know, a lot of sexual things. You know, that's what's on TV. A lot of it, sexual, and then violence and war, killing. You know, jokes about things that aren't, you know, shouldn't be joked about. You know, live different lifestyles. You know, you look at some of these shows. That's what it's all about. Different lifestyles. And if you don't like it, you know, you're in trouble. I think Ellie was talking about, she read an article about a bunch of people were fired because they wouldn't wear a little sticker about lesbians in the workplace. They wouldn't wear it and they fired them. You know, get fired for not wearing a sticker. course, that's not as bad as, I don't think, as probably as going to jail because you sang a hymn in a parking lot, you know. You know, it's just ridiculous what things are happening nowadays. You know, you ask some people, well, what constitutes a family? You know, people don't even know what a family is anymore, in general. A lot of them don't. You know, that the two men living together, two women, or, you know, they just don't know, or don't want to know, you know. But that's the world we live in. Things are different right now than they, you know, when I grew up, I never thought of such a thing as that, you know. It wasn't a part of the culture that most of us grew up in. You know, we have people that are against killing frogs, right? You know, taking care of trees and all this and hugging trees, but it's okay to kill babies. You know, what a mixed up morals. You know, it's just unreal. That you can kill a frog, or you shouldn't kill a frog, but you can kill a baby. That's okay. No. Wow. But, you know, society is, and I'm not saying all people are that way. I'm not saying that at all. I know some really decent people. And I actually, since I'm working up at the university, I think I've come to appreciate a lot of the youth better. The youth are a different generation than they were about 20 years ago. I used to hire a bunch of kids at a place I was working, and I was kind of in charge of a bunch of them. Some of them are really not the best. But the kids I'm dealing with nowadays, there's some pretty decent kids there. I've been encouraged by that. There's some decent kids. You know, polite, go out of the way to do things for people, honest. You know, it's just, I'm encouraged by that fact. John 8:43. You know, we wonder sometimes why people can't understand the Bible, understand what God wants. John 8:43. Why do you not understand my speech, even because you cannot hear my word? You know, God's saying if you can't hear his word, you're not going to be able to understand. You know, just some people, you could just well go talk to your dog, couldn't you? Because he'd understand you better than they would about God. There's a barrier there that they can't get across. In John 8:44 here, you are of your father the devil, and the lust of your father you will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in the truth, but because there is no truth in him, when he speaks a lie, he speaks of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it. See, there's who we have to blame. Right there. That's where it all comes from. Satan, the devil. And that's why it's so important that we need to change things and to understand what God's doing right now. You know, Satan influences man more than we realize, doesn't he? You know, we are human beings. We have our own wants and needs, but we're influenced very much so by what's going on. We're cut off from God, as mankind is. We're cut off. You look around, this society is based on the wrong goals. You know, you look at, you know, the advertising, like I talked about before, the advertising, it's based on lust. You've got to have this. You know, you're not going to a good person if you don't have all these things. That's the advertising that we look at TV all the time, and they've got that down to a science, don't they? They know how to make people react. Where does that come from? You know, they know just the words and how to present things to lead men astray. And that's, you know, a lot of these people that are following, you know, the bad things that are going on, like the looting, the destruction of property. They're being led. They probably don't even realize how much they're being led, but they are being led by the adversary. And most of it's based on lust. I mean, you go and riot, and you go and break into the store and steal TVs and whatever else you can carry away. No, it's lust. They're not rioting because of something that's happening. They're rioting because they want something, and it's fun. Hey, let's go out and do something this Saturday night or Friday night or whatever. Let's go shopping. I heard a couple of people basically say that on TV. Let's go shopping. Unreal, isn't it? That mankind can get down to that level. Referring back to Mr. Kubik's article, with one lady that had a real nice coat on, and they were sending her to the concentration camp, and two women knocked her down, stole the coat, took everything she had in the pockets, and there's a little baby they found. And the one woman had compassion on that baby and raised it. But that's how mankind operates, a lot of things that we do. There's no restraint. Humanity lived in darkness for a long time now, really from the beginning. And, we need deliverance, don't we? We need deliverance. We need to be taken away from the power. And that's the Day of Atonement signifies. To get rid of this power that's leading us all astray. The whole sacrifice system that the ancient Israelites had shows there has to be a penalty for sin. They killed all these animals. Can you imagine killing, a lot of times they killed thousands of animals a day. Can you imagine that? With all the blood and all the things that would be going on if you kill, I don't know, probably not too many of us have butchered something, an animal. I have a few times. But it's not a pretty sight. But can you imagine, thousands and thousands of animals being killed? But there was a lesson there. There has to be a price paid for sin. And that, that's the lesson. You look at that and you think, wow, that animal was my pet. That animal died for me. Well, Jesus Christ came, he died for you and I too. And that's what that was showing, that there has to be a penalty to bring us back to God. There has to be a death. And that's what Jesus Christ came here to say. Romans 8, or Romans 5:8. Romans 5:8. We were hostile to God at one time. Enemies. We have changed the part of that party, humans. And, we were all that way. I didn't understand what God wanted, and neither did you in the beginning. We're actually all hostile. When you start keeping the Sabbath, man, you really look out, neighbors and things. Different. It's amazing when you learn to handle things a little better, though, things work out. Just like I was telling my head boss, I was going to I didn't say the feast, I said I got a retreat I got to go to. Well, in a university thing, that's pretty common. So, okay. Oh, you went there last year too? Yeah, I did. But there's no problem because I was going to a retreat. That's one of those deals which it is. We're going to a retreat. We're getting away from the world. But the hostility there that can be for keeping God's feasts, God's holy days. But we need to be brought back to God, don't we? This world brought back to God. We need to reconnect. This whole world needs to change, and we need to change ourselves too. It's not God that ran away from us. Mankind, we've run away from God. God's still there. He hasn't changed. Mankind, after that tree, has gone the other direction. We have a pride of life, just like Satan had that pride of, I'm really great. And mankind has that too. I'm really great. But, we, and the entirety of the world, has to change. Can we imagine changing this whole world? That's what this day is going to help bring about, the atonement that's coming up. To change the whole world, to get rid of the leaders of this world that we have in high places. It's hard for us human beings to understand the power that these people have, or these entities have. There's a lot of power out there that we're fighting as a human being to do the things we know that God wants us to do. We have adversaries, powerful adversaries. But notice, after this day, what we're going to be doing. In 2 Peter, I want to have you turn to 2 Peter 2:2, we're to judge demons. Judge angels. And have a say what happens to them. Can you imagine that? Us puny human beings will have that chance to say, hey, this is what's wrong. You did this, you did that, this is what you're going to have to do, or what you're going to go through. They didn't want to be judged. Remember Jesus Christ at one time in Luke 8:28? They didn't want to be judged by Jesus Christ. They were afraid. They knew judgment was coming. They knew who Christ was. They knew that judgment. And they didn't understand when that judgment was going to be. But they knew it was going to happen. There's fire prepared for Satan and his angels. And, can you imagine not being able to die the way it looks? To be tormented forever. No. They got that to look forward to, brethren. And I think that deep down they still think they're going to win. They're going to win. But they're not. They're not going to win. God's going to win, and God's plan is going to happen. But we're going to have a part in that. We're going to be, can you imagine us sitting in front of Satan and say, well, okay, this is our decision. Can you imagine that? Or these demons and things that we deal with. But they're going to have a fate that we just, we can't imagine, can we? To be separated from God forever. To be in outer darkness forever. And that's what I think that's one reason that this time of the year, a lot of things happen, don't they? They know what this day means more than we do. They get really agitated. We just need to understand that, this is what's going on. This is how important atonement is. To get rid of the top terrorist. You can imagine that? A world without terrorism. To get rid of the leader. That's what God's working toward. That's what He has you and I here to understand and to know. That things are going to change. That this way of life on this earth today is not going to be like it is all the time. We're coming to a point when God's going to really step in. He hasn't really He steps in a little bit here, there, and a little bit here. But He's really going to step in. Jesus Christ, when He sets foot on this earth, can you imagine the change? You read the Bible and all the fighting and things that when Jesus Christ comes back, it's not a pleasant time. But it's a time when this world will begin to change to a better world. And that Jesus Christ and God is going to rule this world in righteousness. And we won't hear of these terrible things that are going on anymore. There'll be history. So let's appreciate what God's doing through His plan and through His people that He's working with. And just really appreciate God's will and what He wants us to accomplish.